It was a regular quiet morning when a woman's car broke down in the middle of nowhere. Alone, stranded, and stressed, she sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard that refused to show any signs of life. She wasn't sure how she was going to make it through the day, let alone get her car back on the road. Everything felt like it was falling apart, but what happened next was far from what she had expected. Out of nowhere, a mechanic showed up. No appointment, no prior connection, just a simple man with a toolbox and a heart full of kindness. He didn't know her story or why she was in this situation, and frankly, it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that someone needed help, and he was the person to give it. What happened in the moments that followed would change not just the woman's day, but the mechanic's life in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. He worked tirelessly, fixing the broken car, giving it a second chance at life. The woman, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness, insisted that she pay him, but the mechanic wouldn't hear of it. It was never about the money. He was just doing what he felt was right. But little did he know, this simple act of generosity would set off a chain of events that none of them could have predicted. As the mechanic walked away, a sense of satisfaction filled him. He wasn't looking for anything in return, but that's when the unexpected happened. Days later, he received a gift that left him speechless. Something so extraordinary that he was left questioning everything he knew about kindness, fate, and how small acts can create ripples in the world. But what was this gift? How did it change his life so dramatically? And what was the real story behind the woman's gratitude? Stay tuned, because the twist that follows is something you won't want to miss. The woman, whose name was Sarah, hadn't been having the best of times lately. A string of bad luck had left her struggling, both emotionally and financially. Her job as a freelance writer had been sporadic, and bills were piling up. The car breaking down that morning was just the final straw. It wasn't just a car, it was her lifeline. Without it, she couldn't make it to the few jobs she managed to pick up. The thought of trying to find a way to get it repaired, let alone afford it, seemed impossible. When the mechanic showed up, she was too overwhelmed to think straight. He looked like someone who had seen a fair share of broken down cars in his time. His name was Mike, a quiet middle-aged man with a rugged exterior, but a kindness in his eyes that stood out against the gruffness of his work clothes. He had been running his own small shop for years, and his reputation for being trustworthy had spread through the community. People knew him for fixing things, not for taking advantage of others. When Sarah insisted on paying him for the work, Mike simply shook his head. "I'm just doing my job," he said, with a calm smile that made her feel a little bit lighter. She tried to argue, but Mike was persistent. In the end, all she could do was thank him and promise to pay it forward someday. It wasn't the kind of help she was used to receiving, and for a moment, it made her feel like there was still hope in the world. But hope can be fragile, and after Mike left, reality came rushing back in. The weight of her financial struggles was still there. The bills would come, the car would need more attention, and there was no telling when her next paycheck would arrive. As the days passed, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what Mike had done. It wasn't just the free service. It was the fact that he had treated her with respect, as if she mattered, as though her struggles weren't something to be brushed aside. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she didn't feel right leaving things this way. Mike had been so generous, and she hadn't been able to offer him anything in return. Meanwhile, Mike didn't think much of it. It wasn't the first time he'd helped someone in need. Over the years, his shop had seen its fair share of desperate situations. There was something about fixing a car that went beyond mechanics for him. It was about making people feel whole again, even If just for a moment, he hadn't expected anything in return, and that was fine with him. He had a small, modest life, a routine he was used to. The satisfaction of knowing he'd helped was enough. But when he received the unexpected gift from Sarah, everything changed. It was an old envelope, addressed to him in neat handwriting. The kind of handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone who still took the time to write carefully. When Mike opened it, inside was a small check. But it wasn't. Just the money that caught his attention. The note attached to it read, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would." That one line hit him like a wave. It wasn't just a thank you for the work he had done on her car. It was a recognition of something deeper. Mike wasn't sure what to make of it at first. He didn't want to accept the money. He felt awkward, unsure of how to respond. But the gesture meant more than he could have anticipated. It was a sign of gratitude, sure, but it also reminded him of how little he had actually expected in return for helping her. He hadn't known Sarah's full story, but somehow she had known enough of his to understand that this small act of kindness had meant something more than just fixing an engine. Still, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. Sarah's thank you had stirred something in him, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized that her gesture wasn't just about the car. It was a reminder that life could change, sometimes in the smallest ways. What he hadn't anticipated was the ripple effect of that simple act. Sarah, on the other hand, found herself feeling conflicted. She had made the decision to give Mike the money, but as the days went on, she started to wonder if it was enough. Mike had helped her in a way no one else had, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to be done. But how could she repay someone who had done something so meaningful, yet expected nothing in return? The check she had sent felt like the right thing, but it didn't feel complete. Her mind was racing with the possibilities of how she could show Mike just how much his kindness had meant to her. One afternoon, Sarah made a decision. She would visit Mike's shop, not to drop off more money, but to do something else. She wasn't sure what it would be yet, but she knew she had to do something to show her gratitude in a way that went beyond just a check. She felt as though she owed him something deeper, something that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. When Sarah arrived at the shop, Mike was working on a car. She hesitated before walking in, unsure of how to approach him. But as soon as he saw her, he smiled, and she knew that this wasn't just a business transaction anymore. There was something more here, something that connected them beyond the moment of the car repair. "What brings you back here?" Mike asked, his voice friendly yet guarded. He didn't know what to expect, but he certainly hadn't anticipated what was coming next. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did," Sarah said, taking a deep breath. "And I wanted to thank you again, in person." Mike raised an eyebrow. He had no idea what she was about to do, but something in her tone suggested that the story wasn't over yet. Little did he know, the next few moments would change everything for both of them, forever. What happened next was nothing like what either of them had expected. As Sarah stood there, uncertainty mixed with gratitude in her eyes, Mike looked at her, silently waiting for her next words. The tension in the air seemed to build with each passing second. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Mike, I've been going through a lot lately, but when you helped me, you didn't just fix my car. You fixed something inside me too. I needed someone to show kindness, to remind me that not everyone is just out for themselves." Mike's expression softened, but he was still unsure where this conversation was going. "I didn't do anything special. I just did my job." Sarah shook her head. "It was more than that. You didn't ask for anything in return, and I just can't let that go. I want to do something for you, something that goes beyond money, Mike." stared at her, not sure how to respond. His shop was small, and his life was simple. He didn't need grand gestures, and he certainly didn't want to make things awkward. But as Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small crumpled envelope, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. She handed it to him, and without saying another word, she turned to leave. Mike opened the envelope slowly, his heart beginning to race. Inside was something unexpected, something far more valuable than money. It was a piece of paper, simple and unassuming, but with words that hit him harder than anything he had ever received. It was a letter of recommendation, but not just any letter. It was a glowing letter from one of Sarah's clients, praising Mike's work in such glowing terms that it felt like a lifetime of hard work had just been validated in a single page. I've been thinking about how much I wanted to repay you for your kindness. Sarah's note read, I work with a lot of people who need a good mechanic, and I wanted to make sure you get the recognition you deserve. Your skill and your heart, that's something people should know about. I hope this helps bring in the business you deserve. Thank you for being a light when I needed it most. Mike felt a lump form in his throat as he read the letter again, this time slower, letting the full weight of Sarah's words sink in. She had done something for him that he never expected. It wasn't just about money or even thank yous. It was a heartfelt gesture that would lead to real change in his life. For the first time in a long while, Mike felt seen, not just for his work, but for the person he was. As the days went by, the ripple effect of Sarah's gift became clear. Mike's shop saw a steady stream of new customers. Word of mouth spread quickly, and before he knew it, business was booming. Sarah's thoughtful gesture had opened doors that Mike hadn't even realized were there. His small shop, which had once struggled, was now thriving, and Mike couldn't help but reflect on how a single act of kindness could lead to something so much bigger than he'd ever imagined. But what struck him the most wasn't the newfound business. It was the way Sarah had seen him, not just as a mechanic, but as a person worthy of recognition and respect. She had taken a moment to make a real difference, not just by paying for a service, but by giving him the gift of visibility, of opportunity. The day Mike realized the full impact of what had happened was when he found Sarah standing outside his shop again, this time with a smile on her face that seemed to reflect the change in both their lives. I see it's been a good few weeks, she said with a wink. Yeah, I can't believe it, Mike admitted, his voice filled with disbelief. Your letter, it really worked. My business is booming. Sarah grinned. I knew it would. People deserve to know about someone like you. Mike nodded, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. You didn't just help me get my shop back on track. You helped me believe that kindness still means something. I'll never forget that. As they stood there, exchanging smiles, there was a quiet realization between them. Sometimes it's the smallest moments of generosity that have the biggest impact. Mike's life had changed in ways he couldn't have predicted, and Sarah had found the peace she'd been looking for all along. It wasn't about the money or the business. It was about the connection between two people who, at their lowest, had found each other at just the right time. For both of them, the story wasn't just about a mechanic fixing a car. It was about how simple acts of kindness can reverberate through our lives in ways we may never fully understand. And as the sun set on that quiet afternoon, both Mike and Sarah knew that no matter where life took them next, they would always carry the gift of that unexpected connection, the one that had changed everything, simply because they had chosen to be kind to one another. And sometimes, that's all it takes to turn a day and a life around.